Hello, this is Ola, your host on The Unpolished Mum, your weekly podcast on all things parenthood, languages and real life struggles. I'm really honoured you've decided to listen to me today, so let's begin. Hi everybody, nice to have you here again. Thank you so much for all your lovely comments about the previous episode. I know it felt really close to home for many of you, and thank you so much for expressing all your thoughts and experiences about how your expectations and your reality of motherhood sort of panned out. And today's episode is going to be very, very special, and I'm very excited about it because today I've got a special guest with me. And we're going to talk about how we mother and help other mothers with breastfeeding. So my guest today is Wendy Lever. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much for saying yes to this. I'm really, really grateful and excited. So Wendy is an IBCLC, so an international qualified breastfeeding consultant. She qualified in 2013. She is herself a mom of 2 kids. They are big, however. She's got a 15-year-old Chloe and an 11-year-old Josh. And what she does is helping moms to have a breastfeeding journey that they want rather than telling them what it should look like. So, Wendy, did you always want to become a breastfeeding consultant?
No, not at all. In fact, when I had my first, I didn't even know the profession existed. All I knew after having my first baby was, goodness, this is hard. And I think I remember saying to my husband as we got home from hospital, you need to find me someone who fixes this. I couldn't even articulate what the name of the profession was. Wow. And I was probably the worst kind of client because as the poor lactation consultant walked through the door, I pointed to a tin of formula and said very threateningly, if you don't fix me, I'm going to use that.
Oh my God, hilarious. But so the profession did exist back then, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think there was a lot less awareness, just a lot less social media. So you couldn't really ask people. You were much more reliant on if you had friends who'd had babies already. And what always struck me was how one meeting with this lactation consultant could turn something that I'd be literally genuinely looking at my baby saying, please don't wake up, you're going to want to feed, into something that was actually fine. And wow. It was very transformative having that experience. And yet still that wasn't kind of the path I was on. Went back to my, had my maternity leave, went back to work, had my second baby, went, can't do this again. Got the same lady back. Wow. Probably a bit nicer to her second time around. And then only after I had my second, when I was looking for new directions, did I think to myself, goodness, I wonder if this is a real profession that I can qualify for. And I did my research and turns out it was.
Wow. And it's amazing. I think some people really feel it. We've had a chat about it, but some people really, really sort of feel it, and it's definitely, you can tell that it's their vocation. So do you think this, you've talked about your own breastfeeding struggles and journey, and do you think it affected the decision to become an IBCLC?
Oh, I think it did, for sure, because for me it made such a difference. And I know 100% with my first, I would no way have continued to breastfeed without her support. And then probably if I hadn't with my first, I may have just decided not to try with my second, because I would have internalized the thought of this is something that I can't do. And then I would have probably, it's difficult to tell, but quite possibly have not tried again with my second. So I think it made a huge difference. And I love that you can just go in at such a special time in a family's life and you actually have a lot of power, because you can really, really help these mums, but you could also devastate them. So you have to be really careful how you speak and what you say, and to make sure that you're supporting what they're going through in that moment.
I can imagine that obviously the qualification, the course in itself, it does include a lot of knowledge about lactation in itself and the sort of medical side of things, but also lots of psychology, because as you say, it is very sensitive, but it must be really rewarding as well, isn't it?
It is. And actually, luckily, the qualification does take you through both those sides. And not only are you doing the lactation courses, if you're not already a medical professional, you do have to do courses in, psychology, in counselling, in anatomy, and all sorts of auxiliary things to make sure that you know what you're doing. And most importantly, before you can take the board exam, you have to do 1,000 hours of supervised practice.
Oh my God, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot of hours, but not only can you make a potential difference, you can sometimes really spot something very dangerous going on. There are very rare occasions, but have been occasions where I've gone to a client and seen a severely, severely underfed baby, and that other people have seen, the GP has seen this baby, the health visitor has seen this baby, and because they didn't have the skills to help them fix the breastfeeding, they would be saying to them, "Oh, keep going, well done, keep going." And actually, sometimes it takes a breastfeeding professional to come in and say, "We will fix the breastfeeding, but right now you need to feed your baby, and we need to build things back up so that you can feed your baby."
So like taking a step back.
Taking a step back. Well, in my mind, it's always kind of 3 golden rules, if you like. Number 1, feed the baby. Number 2, maximize the milk supply. Number 3, fix the breastfeeding. And they have to come in that order, because a very underfed baby just does not have the strength or stamina to do anything at the breast. So they must be fed. We cannot sacrifice calories today for the sake of building up supply tomorrow. And it doesn't work. You need a well-fed baby, you need a milk supply, and then we can work on getting the 2 bits together.
Absolutely. And it does take a professional to tell you that, because any mum would just think, "Oh, I'm just going to carry on, right? I'm just going to try by myself," because it's supposed to be natural, right?
It's supposed to be natural. And unfortunately, sometimes normal situations and very abnormal situations on the surface, when you're describing, could look the same. So this mum might say that her baby cluster feeds a lot, and she was probably saying, and then he gets quite sleepy. And everybody was saying to her, "Yes, that's really normal," because actually what she's describing could be a normal situation. But in this case, it wasn't normal. Cluster feeding is once a day, a really long marathon feed. If every feed is a cluster feed, if every feed slowly segues into the next feed, and most critically, if baby is not giving you those wet and dirty nappies, then something's going on.
Exactly.
And it can be really difficult for people, even just, for myself, even if some mum says to me on the phone, "Oh, baby's really sleepy." I want to know, do I have sleepy baby because he is super well fed, super satisfied, it's all great? Or do I have sleepy baby because he's really underfed and doesn't have the stamina to stay awake? Because to mum's eyes, they might look like the same baby. Just as a layperson, the thing that you can really tell the difference between those 2 babies are the nappies. That first good sleepy baby will be weeing and pooing for England. That second sleepy baby, when I'll say to mum, "When did baby last poo?" she'll sort of say, "Well, today's Monday, so was it Friday or Saturday?" That's a massive red flag already.
That's a good tip. That's a good, and it takes quite a lot to even interpret that, because as you say, to a lot of people, there is even a saying, "Oh, he sleeps like a baby," right? Babies just sleep. So it could be, it could be natural and normal, but again, it takes a professional eye very oftentimes to tell that there could be a potential problem. And I feel like you've mentioned GPs not noticing that a baby's is really not gaining weight, or that there is a potential problem. And from my personal experience and observations, there's just not enough awareness about breastfeeding, lactation. There are too many myths, too much judgment as well when it comes to feeding babies. And do you have any of your own opinions or observations why that could be, and what would have to happen that the awareness would raise in the society about the benefits of breastfeeding, but also about the facts?
Okay. So I think it's really tricky. I think a lot of the medical profession, it's really hard for them, because you can become a fully qualified GP without any breastfeeding training. And yet mums will come to the GPs, and some of them are wonderful, really wonderful, and have really gone out of their way to learn and to know. Very often, if they're newish parents themselves, a lot of it's anecdotal from their own breastfeeding experience, but not everybody knows. And often, going to your GP is your first port of call with a lot of new issues. And I think there is definitely a growing awareness. I've definitely worked with GPs and had GPs refer, and we'll have conversations, and they know to refer on to professional help. But I also feel for them, because if they have a mum in front of them whose baby is not thriving, whose baby is not gaining weight, really the only tool at their disposal is to recommend the baby get some formula, because they're operating on that number one rule, right? We have to feed the baby.
Yeah.
And if they don't have the knowledge or the skills to help mum fix the breastfeeding, the only thing they have left in their toolbox to recommend is to give formula. So
which is
I
not
do
their
have a lot
fault.
of empathy for them. It's difficult to know what to do in that situation when you do see a baby in front of you who needs more food.
Which isn't even their fault, because if it's not part of their training. And funnily enough, I think the situation in Poland is actually the same. The pediatricians, that would be the first port of call for parents with whatever, any concerns with babies. We don't really have the institution of a GP. We would have a separate doctor for grown-ups and just going to pediatrician for babies. They very often wouldn't know what to do because of lack of training.
I think so. And then I think also a lot of times the way our system is set up, mums give birth, often within 24 hours they're kind of sent home. We then weigh the babies on day 5. Now, if you haven't had any breastfeeding support in those first few days, it can be really tricky to get things started, because it's a learned skill as much as it's natural. Baby gets weighed on day 5. This is a very, very typical British scenario. We realise baby's lost more weight than we would like. They get rushed back to hospital. They sometimes get admitted, they sometimes don't, but they will always then be put on a feeding plan, which more often than not times a breastfeed and then gives them a certain volume of top up. Now, in the moment, that will tick a box. It will help the baby gain some weight and it will give them some food. But it leaves mum in no man's land, because what it doesn't do is help her move back to where she wanted to be.
Yeah.
Now, if she wanted to be bottle feeding, that's absolutely fine, and no one's going to get in her way. That's her legitimate choice to make. But if you have in front of you a breastfeeding mum who wants to breastfeed and has been given this plan, she needs a way out. And I think that's what's missing from the system. So lots and lots of mums by day 6 or 7 have this top-up plan, which is not realistic in the long term.
No,
because
sustainable if she wants to breastfeed.
If she wants to breastfeed, it's kind of in that triple feeding I call cycle of hell, where you're breastfeeding, and then at some point you go, oh goodness, that wasn't good enough, okay, fine, and then you top up with a bottle, and then you sit down and pump to try and increase your breast milk supply, and then you look up and you go, oh my goodness, it's been 2 3/4 hours, I need to start this whole process again. And it's not sustainable. And what falls by the wayside for a lot of those mums is the breastfeeding part, because they can't not feed the baby. You must feed your baby. And sometimes they'll end up intensively pumping and feeding their baby, and then looking up a couple of weeks later and thinking, well, this is not where I intended to be, but I don't know how to get out of it. Exactly.
Is that when they often come to you for advice? Would you say that's the most common sort of situation, or?
It's a very common situation. And what I would love for those mums to have done is the first second that internal compass said, this doesn't quite feel right, to get in the support. Yeah. Because, I mean, what I would love to do is routinely on day 3 go visit all mums.
Oh my God, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because on day 3, as your milk comes in and the emotions come in, and nearly always